International news today, June 7th, 2025. How the US could be vulnerable to the same kind of drone swarm attack Ukraine unleashed on Russia's bomber fleet. Trump's call restores trade truce, but the supply chain war has no end in sight. European Union backs ICC after US sanctions on court judges. Red Cross closes Niger offices and foreign staff leave after junta's expulsion order. Ghanaian citizens can now travel to Morocco without a visa. Summary of the news. How the US could be vulnerable to the same kind of drone swarm attack Ukraine unleashed on Russia's bomber fleet. A recent Ukrainian drone strike on Russian air bases destroyed or damaged at least 12 aircraft, revealing how exposed high-value military assets can be, even deep within national borders. The drones were smuggled close to Russian bases and launched from hidden containers, bypassing defenses and hitting planes left uncovered on the tarmac. US military leaders, including General David Alvin and General Stanley MC Crystal, warned that American aircraft are similarly vulnerable. Many US bases lack hardened shelters, making planes like the $2 billion B-2 bomber easy targets. One simulation suggests the majority of US aircraft losses in a conflict will happen on the ground. China, by contrast, has built over 640 fortified shelters near the Taiwan Strait, showing a stronger commitment to protecting its air fleet. While the US spends heavily on offensive systems and missile defense like the proposed $175 billion Golden Dome, less has been allocated to base protection. Trump's call restores trade truce, but the supply chain war has no end in sight. US President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping held a 90-minute phone call agreeing to resume stalled trade talks. The conversation marked a temporary pause in rising tensions, but key disagreements, especially over supply chains and national security, remain unresolved. Key issues: rare earths. The US accused China of backpedaling on its promise to ease rare earth export restrictions. China insists it's following protocol, but admits approvals can be sped up or delayed based on political climate. Export controls. The US has restricted Chinese access to advanced AI chips and design software, prompting China to consider leveraging its dominance in rare earths to push back. Student visa. China objected to new US visa policy targeting Chinese students. Trump publicly welcomed Chinese students, signaling possible internal disagreement within his administration. Taiwan. Xi warned the US against supporting Taiwan, highlighting the broader geopolitical dimension of the dispute beyond just trade. European Union backs ICC after US sanctions on court judges. The EU and UN have condemned US sanctions on 4 International Criminal Court (ICC) judges imposed after the ICC issued arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu and pursued investigations into US war crimes in Afghanistan. EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen reaffirmed support for the ICC's independence, while the UN Rights Chief Volker Turk called the sanctions an attack on the rule of law. The judges from Uganda, Peru, Benin, and Slovenia now face asset freezes and global banking restrictions. Slovenia urged the EU to invoke its blocking status to protect its citizens. The move is part of a revived ICC opposition under President Trump, who claimed the court unfairly targets the US and Israel. Red Cross closes Niger offices and foreign staff leave after junta's expulsion order. The International Committee on the Red Cross (ICRC) has officially closed its offices in Niger and withdrawn its foreign staff, following a February directive from Niger's military junta to leave the country. Although no reasons were initially given, junta leader Abdulrahman Tijani later accused the ICRC of engaging with terrorist leaders and funding armed groups, claimed the ICRC firmly denied. The ICRC emphasized that engaging all parties in the conflict is vital to fulfilling its humanitarian mission and stated it never supports armed groups. It had been operating in Niger since 1990, assisting over 2 million people affected by conflict, food shortages, and natural disasters. This move reflects Niger's broader shift away from Western allies like France and the US toward closer ties with Russia since the 2023 coup. It follows the earlier expulsion of another French aid group, acted. Ghanaian citizens can now travel to Morocco without a visa. Ghana and Morocco have agreed to remove the need for traditional visas for Ghanaian travelers to Morocco. Instead, Ghanaians can now obtain an online travel authorization within 24 hours. This policy, announced by Ghana's Foreign Affairs Minister Samuel Okudzeto Ablakwa, aims to simplify travel, boost tourism, trade, and strengthen ties between the two countries. Direct flights are already operating, with more expected to follow. Ablakwa emphasized that African borders should unite, not divide the continent. Follow for more. June 7, 2025.